For 400 years, the brightest minds in the galaxy worshipped the obsidian ruins as a monument to dead gods. Then a human contractor named Eric wiped a layer of space dust off the sacred altar, read the divine inscription in 3 seconds, and whispered, "Run, it's a reactor breach." Enjoying stories like this one? Take a second and hit that like button and please subscribe. Your support helps us reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and it genuinely keeps these stories coming. Seconds, drop a comment too, because by the end of this you will have an opinion about that cat. Now let us move forward up. The planet designated Haven 9 was a desolate rock at the edge of the Orion Spur, an irradiated wasteland swept by perpetual atmospheric dust storms. Yet beneath its hostile surface lay the greatest archaeological obsession in the known galaxy. For 4 centuries, the interstellar coalition known as the Syndicate had poured trillions of credits, thousands of scholars, and generations of labor into a single massive subterranean cavern. They were studying the architects, or at least that was the working title given to the unknown species that had left behind a sprawling monolithic complex of dark, seamless metal that defied all metallurgical analysis. Director Kevin Caldwell stood on the command deck of the central observation platform, staring down into the glowing abyss of the excavation site. Through his species' standard neurolinguistic translator, his native alien designation was rendered into a palatable Western name for the sake of the human contractors, a new, rather annoying necessity. Caldwell was a high scholar of the Lumina, a race of tall, slender beings who prided themselves on intellectual supremacy. For 12 decades, this site had been his personal dominion. And for 12 decades, it had offered him absolutely nothing but silence. "Director," a voice crackled over the intercom. It was Security Chief Harrison Reed, a human liaison assigned to the dig by the United Earth Council. "The transport from Earth has arrived. The structural assessment team is here," Caldwell sighed, the sound echoing softly in the sterile white-walled command center. "It is a single man, Chief Reed, hardly a... And I still protest this decision. We are on the verge of a breakthrough with the quantum harmonic resonance of the primary monolith. We do not need a what did the Sol Alliance call him. The Union Inspector." "With respect, Director," Chief Reed said, his tone clipped and professional, "the Syndicate Council cut your funding. The containment field holding back the seismic pressure of the cavern ceiling is failing. Bechtel Interstellar won the contract to assess the ruins and shore up the ceiling. If he doesn't sign off, Bechtel doesn't build the supports and your site collapses. I'm sending him down." 10 minutes later, the airlock hissed open, and Eric Granger stepped onto the observation deck. He didn't look like an explorer. He certainly didn't look like a scholar. He wore a heavy, scuffed canvas hazard suit plastered with faded corporate logos, a Bechtel Caterpillar Heavy Industries insignia stitched over his left breast, next to a patch reading * Lockheed Martin Off-World Salvage and Recovery. He carried a battered metal toolbox. His hands were stained with grease that looked a decade old, broad-shouldered, unshaven, chewing a synthetic toothpick. Humanity had joined the Syndicate only 20 years ago. To the elder races, humans were the galaxy's mechanics, reckless, uncultured, driven by corporate greed and a bizarre fetish for heavy machinery instead of the pursuit of higher enlightenment. "Mr. Granger," Director Caldwell said, not bothering to hide his disdain. "I am Director Caldwell. I'll remind you this is a Class 1 heritage site. You will not touch the artifacts. You will not interfere with the linguistic drones. You will look at the rocks above us, do your little math, and leave." Granger set his toolbox down with a metallic clank that made Caldwell wince. "Nice to meet you too, Art." His voice was a low, gravelly baritone. "I get paid by the hour, and my union doesn't cover divine retribution from alien ghosts. I'm just here to make sure this cave doesn't crush your billion-dollar microscopes. Where's the main support structure?" "There are no supports, Mr. Granger." Caldwell turned back to the window overlooking the cavern. "The architects didn't build like us. They shaped the planet itself. The complex is suspended by geometric perfection and fields of dark energy." Granger stepped up to the glass. Below, bathed in the harsh white light of 1,000 floodlights, lay the ruin, a sprawling citadel of smooth, dark gray blocks without a single visible seam. At its center stood a colossal pyramid, 800 meters tall, ringed by massive pylons. Granger squinted. He didn't see geometric perfection or spiritual harmony. He saw heavy industrial design. The pylons looked suspiciously like cooling tower. The flat platforms around the pyramid reeked of docking bays. "Looks like a refinery," he muttered. Caldwell scoffed. "A refinery? You humans look at the divine and see a factory. This is a temple, Granger, a repository of cosmic knowledge. For 400 years, we've studied the sacred runes on the primary door of the central monolith. They speak of a harmonic convergence, a gateway to the realm of pure energy. Our linguists are mapping the symbols to the constellations of Andromeda." "Right, stars and magic." Granger tapped his steel-toed boots against the deck. "Well, I need readings from the base of that temple to calculate load-bearing stress on the bedrock. Take me down." Caldwell signaled to Reed. "Escort the inspector to the perimeter. Keep him away from Dr. Bennett's team. They're running a delicate fractal translation on the main gate." The elevator descended, and the scale of the ruins grew oppressive. The air was cold, smelling of ozone and ancient dust. Granger studied the clean-cut walls of the cavern. "Plasma bore," he said quietly. Reed raised an eyebrow. "What?" "The rock," Granger pointed. "Your eggheads think this was shaped by dark energy. Look at the slag lines, that's thermal scarring. High-yield plasma drills, same way Bechtel clears asteroids for mining colonies, just scaled way up." "These ruins are carbon-dated to 50,000 years ago," Reed said. "Nobody had plasma drills back then. Humanity was barely figuring out how to sharpen rocks." "I know what I see," Granger said, hefting his toolbox as the doors opened. The dig site floor was a hive of frantic activity. Hundreds of drones swept blue scanning lasers across seamless gray metal. Scholars in pristine white robes murmured into data pads, arguing quantum string theory and metaphysical geometry. Granger ignored them and walked straight for the pyramid. Up close, the material swallowed light, no reflections at all. "Don't touch it," a sharp voice said. Dr. Chloe Bennett approached, a synthesoid, cybernetic member of a race that served as the galaxy's premier data analysts. Pale synthetic skin, eyes glowing with rings of blue light as she processed data by the petabyte. "I wasn't going to," Granger lied, dropping the hand he'd been about to run along the metal. "You're the human structural engineer," she said, flat but laced with algorithmic superiority. "I am Dr. Bennett, head of the Linguistic Decoding Initiative. You are standing in the threshold of the Grand Gate. Step back. Your biological heat signature is causing microfluctuations in our spectral imaging." Granger looked past her. At the base of the pyramid stood a sheer, recessed wall, the Grand Gate. Above it, 3 massive symbols were etched deep into the metal, the only markings on the entire complex, buried under centuries of calcified mineral buildup, but still faintly visible. Holographic projectors around the gate broke the symbols down into thousands of fractal subcomponents. 400 years, Bennett said, following his gaze. "My predecessors dedicated lifespans to these 3 runes. We've determined they form a threefold cipher. The first, intersecting triangles, represents the holy trinity of their philosophy, mind, body, and cosmos. The second, a sphere with radiating lines, is clearly a map of a dying sun. The third, an interlocking lattice, represents the eternal binding of the soul to the universe." Granger stared at the holograms, tilted his head, pulled the toothpick from his mouth. "You've been studying these 3 symbols for 400 years. Linguistics of a transcendent species is not simple, Mr. Granger. The architects communicated in concepts far beyond our primitive grasp of language. We are currently aligning the geometric angles of the first symbol with the gravitational pull of the planet's moons to find the temporal key that opens the door." Granger walked past her, ignoring her protest, and stepped up to the massive door. The calcification here was thick, like concrete, but underneath he noticed something the scholars hadn't cared about. The metal wasn't perfectly smooth, microscopic stress fractures, scuffs. Where? "This isn't a temple asterisk," he thought. "People walked here. People worked here." He looked up at the 3 symbols, each roughly 3 meters wide. The holograms had smoothed them into perfect mathematical abstractions. But looking at the raw carvings beneath the grime, a cold knot formed in his stomach. "Mr. Granger, step away from the threshold." Caldwell's voice boomed across the cavern as he approached, flanked by armed syndicate guards. "You are contaminating the dig site." "Director," Granger said quietly, but it carried. "What's the chemical composition of this metal?" "A transdimensional polymer, completely unknown to science." "No, it isn't." Granger pulled a spectrometer from his belt, aimed it at a scratched section of the door, and fired. A red light flashed. Titanium tungsten alloy. High carbon doped with depleted uranium. It's armor plating. Nonsense, Bennett said. Our scans show energy signatures. You're scanning ambient radiation trapped in the cavern. Granger didn't take his eyes off the door. He pointed up. Dr. Bennett, the first symbol, intersecting triangles, mind, body, cosmos. Yes, she recited proudly. Second one, circle with lines. A dying sun, a testament to the fragility of stellar life. Third, the lattice. The eternal binding of the soul. Granger pulled off his hard hat and ran a hand through his hair. A hollow, unhinged laugh escaped him, so genuine that the armed guards took a half step back. Mr. Granger, have you lost your mind? Caldwell demanded. No, Granger whispered, but you people are about to lose your lives. A deep, bone-rattling vibration shook the cavern. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. The floodlights flickered. A low hum began deep within the pyramid. Director, a technician shouted from a terminal. Energy spike, the central core is activating. Resonance is off the charts. Caldwell's eyes went wide with religious ecstasy. The architects, they are responding. The harmonic convergence is beginning. Dr. Bennett initialized the quantum greeting protocols. No, shut it down, Granger roared. It's not a greeting, it's a pressure buildup. Silence, human. You are witnessing the awakening of the gods. The ground heaved. Drones crashed to the floor. A seam of blinding blue light split along the massive door's edges. The cavern's temperature spiked 20 degrees in seconds. Director, containment field is failing, Reed yelled over the growing roar. We have to evacuate. No, we stand our ground. This is the moment of revelation. Granger didn't hesitate. He grabbed his toolbox, sprinted for the door, and slammed his boots onto a raised platform at its base. Get him away from there, Caldwell screamed. Reed, hold them off, Granger yelled, hauling out a plasma torch and a tungsten carbide scraper. If I don't stop this, this whole continent becomes a crater. Reed saw the absolute terror in the engineer's eyes. He drew his sidearm and turned it on the syndicate guards instead. Nobody moves. Let the engineer work. The mechanical scream tearing through the cavern rattled the marrow in Granger's bones. Heat radiated off the stress fractures in the door, baking the air, softening the rubber soles of his boots against the floor plates. He looked up at the three colossal runes the galaxy's greatest minds had worshipped for 4 centuries. He didn't see mind, body, and cosmos. He saw 3 overlapping crescents tethered to a central circle, the universal ancient Earth symbol for biohazard. The second rune, Bennett's dying sun, was a solid circle with 3 blades radiating at 60-degree angles, the trefoil for ionizing radiation. Granger fired up the plasma torch and blasted away 50,000 years of spiritual reverence in a shower of sparks and slag. The third symbol wasn't a mystical lattice. It was a corporate logo, a blocky W inside a hexagon. Westinghouse, he muttered, coughing on the acrid dust. Westinghouse Heavy Industries Sol System. 50,000 years ago, long before Mesopotamia, humanity hadn't just reached the stars, they'd conquered them. Built monstrosities like this. And then something had gone catastrophically wrong. Wiped out, regressed to the caves, forgetting entirely where they'd buried their most toxic sins. But Granger didn't have the luxury of philosophizing about a lost empire. He had a localized apocalypse to prevent. Granger, what are you doing? Step away from the gate, Reed screamed. Reading the damn instructions? Below the 3 hazard symbols, buried under petrified sediment, was a rectangular plaque. To Bennett and generations of scholars, it looked like dense, sacred scripture in a dialect that defied every fractal algorithm. To Granger, it was just English, archaic, block-lettered military specification English. He dropped to his knees and scraped the dirt away with his gloves. Warning, Class 4 Deep Geological Repository. WIPP Outpost A9. Danger, lethal ionizing radiation. In event of containment breach, engage manual override and vent to atmosphere. It's a nuclear waste dump. Granger spun to face the observation deck, where the scholars stood paralyzed, staring in misguided awe at the glowing door. This isn't a temple, it's a subterranean landfill. You've been trying to pry open a 50,000-year-old toxic waste facility. Caldwell froze as the translation matrix fed the words directly into his mind. Waste facility? No, that is impossible. The geometric perfection is brutalist engineering built to withstand tectonic shear stress, Granger yelled, cutting him off, and turned back to the door. The blue light was turning a violent crimson. The titanium tungsten plates groaned and buckled, a thermal runaway of whatever ancient power source held this place locked down was imminent. If the vessel breached, it wouldn't just vaporize the cavern, it would crack the planet's crust. At the bottom of the plaque, to override lockdown, remove panel and pull release bar. Granger threw down his torch and ran his gloved hands over the seamless metal beneath the plaque. 400 years of alien scholars with ultra-sensitive quantum scanners had missed the simple physical truth of human engineering, because they'd been looking for magic instead of mechanics. His fingers found a barely perceptible indentation, a flush-mounted mechanical latch. He wedged the scraper into the seam, gritted his teeth, braced his boots against the scalding metal, and threw his weight backward in a brutal display of leverage. With an ear-splitting crack, the panel snapped off and clattered to the floor, revealing a dark cavity. Inside, under millennia of undisturbed dust, was a heavy yellow and black striped mechanical lever. "Granger ambient heat signatures are going critical," Bennett shrieked, her voice glitching with unprecedented computational panic. "Structural failure in 10 seconds. Granger grabbed the lever, seized solid, fused by 50 millennia of neglect. "Come on, you ancient over-engineered piece of junk." He braced his boot against the wall, wrapped both hands around the bar, and pulled with everything he had. Veins bulging, vision swimming with black spots. The lever gave an inch, then 2. Then, with a pneumatic hiss that threw him backward onto the stone floor, it clicked into the down position. The crimson glow shifted instantly. The world-ending shriek of the core wound down into a low, manageable rumble. High above, massive circular vents, which the scholars had romanticized as stairways to the stars, blew open, venting millions of gallons of superheated steam straight through the crust and into the storms above. The earthquake ceased. The dust settled. The lethal light faded to a dull, safe amber. Silence returned to the cavern, broken only by Eric Granger's ragged breathing as he lay flat on his back, staring at the ceiling. Director Caldwell stepped forward slowly. His robes were ruined, his worldview more so. What exactly did you do?" Granger groaned, sat up, rubbed his lower back. "I pulled the emergency brake, Art." Bennett walked to the wall, her ocular rings spinning as she scanned the exposed plaque. "The script matches no known galactic route. The morphological syntax is entirely alien to the Syndicate database, yet you comprehended it instantly. You bypassed 4 centuries of elite cryptography in 3 seconds. How?" Granger picked up his hard hat, dusted it against his leg, and jammed it back on. He looked at the stunned scholars, then up at the proud, defiant Westinghouse logo of his forgotten ancestors. "Because it's not an alien language, Doc." A grim, weary smile touched his mouth. "It's English, and this whole temple of yours is the legal property of the United States Department of Energy, or at least it was about 50 millennia ago." The scholars stared in stunned silence, their universe rewritten by a man in a canvas suit. "Now," Granger grunted, heaving himself up and picking up his toolbox, "I'm going to need to charge Bechtel triple overtime for this, and you people have a hell of a lot of explaining to do." 24 hours later. The atmosphere on the central observation deck was funeral silent. Director Caldwell sat at the head of the conference table, staring at a holographic projection of the door. He hadn't changed, hadn't slept. He looked like a man who'd watched his deity peel off a rubber mask to reveal a tired accountant. Dr. Bennett, by contrast, hummed with manic computational energy, her eyes whirring through data at a speed that would have melted a mainframe. At the far end, Eric Granger had his boots up on the polished table, leaning back with a fresh toothpick and a lukewarm cup of terrible synthetic coffee. "Read it again, Doctor," Caldwell whispered. "I must be sure I understand the nuance." "Director, there is no nuance." Bennett tapped her data pad. "Applying Mr. Granger's linguistic matrix to the sacred texts of the lower pylons, I've decoded the entire southern wall. What we believe to be a prayer for eternal life translates as, notice. All personnel must wear standard-issue dosimeters beyond this point. Failure to comply will result in immediate termination of employment." Caldwell buried his face in his hands. 4 generations of my family devoted their lives to translating the immediate termination prophecy. My grandfather wrote a thesis on it. He believed it meant the shedding of the mortal coil to ascend to the astral plane. It meant getting fired, Art, Granger said, sipping his coffee, and probably losing your health insurance, though given they were working at a radioactive landfill, the health insurance was pretty good. And the Eastern Obelisk, Caldwell asked, voice cracking. The grand pillar of virtues. An exhaustive list of safety regulations, Bennett said, without pity, including a strict mandate about keeping 3 points of contact while ascending ladders and a warning that, quote, Jenkins needs to stop leaving his lunch in the primary coolant break room. Harrison Reed, arms crossed by the door, barked a laugh before suppressing it. Sorry, we thought you were gods. We aren't gods, kid, Granger said, tossing his toothpick in a recycler. We're just a species with a terrible habit of building really dangerous stuff, blowing ourselves back to the Stone Age, and forgetting where we buried the garbage. This place is a glorified septic tank for 50,000-year-old nuclear waste. Which brings us to the immediate crisis, a cold voice announced from the doorway. High Admiral Gregory Bainbridge strode in, flanked by 6 armed shock troopers. He belonged to Caldwell's species, but where Caldwell was a scholar, Bainbridge was pure military doctrine, black uniform, gold medals clinking as he walked. Admiral, Caldwell said, standing, we weren't expecting the fleet. The Council detected the thermal venting from Haven 9's surface, Bainbridge snapped, glaring at Granger, and intercepted Dr. Bennett's updated linguistic data streams. The High Council has declared this site a level Omega security hazard. Director Caldwell, you are relieved of command. On what grounds? Galactic stability. Bainbridge's voice was flat. Do you understand what this revelation will do to the Syndicate? The elder races have ruled for a millennium on the belief that we're the Architects' spiritual successors. If the galaxy learns the Architects were the ancient ancestors of asterisk humans, a race of grease-stained primitives who joined our coalition 20 years ago, there will be riots. The hierarchy collapses. Granger lowered his boots from the table. So what's the plan, Admiral? Sweep 50,000 years of human history under the rug. I am going to glass this planet. Bainbridge's hand rested on his sidearm. The fleet is moving into high orbit. We initiate a Class 4 orbital bombardment. We turn this septic tank into a sea of molten glass. The official report will state the Architect's reactor catastrophically failed, and brave Director Caldwell died attempting to contain it. Reed drew his weapon instantly, aiming at Bainbridge. The 6 troopers raised their rifles in response, plasma coils whining to charge. Stand down, Chief Reed, Bainbridge sneered. You're outnumbered. You're not dropping a bomb on a Bechtel Lockheed worksite, Granger said, still seated, checking his grease-stained smartwatch. First, destroying corporate property is a direct violation of the Sol Alliance Trade Treaty. The lawyers will bleed the Syndicate dry. Second, you can't glass this planet. And why is that human? Because when I pulled that emergency release lever, it didn't just vent the steam. Granger tapped his watch, projecting a holographic schematic into the room, the pyramid, lines of energy pulsing from its peak, shooting straight up through the atmosphere and out into deep space. I'm a Union inspector, Admiral. When I find a critical failure on a job site, I don't just walk away. I file a grievance. It's a maintenance distress beacon, Bennett whispered, eyes widening. A subspace quantum transmission. It bypasses our communication networks entirely. Where is it broadcasting to? Bainbridge demanded, confidence faltering. No idea, Granger shrugged. But it's a Westinghouse automated system. When you pull the fire alarm, the fire department shows up. And given the size of the landfill down there, he offered a grim, predatory smile, I'm guessing the truck's going to be pretty big. The command deck shook, not from the ruins below, but from a sudden catastrophic shift in gravitational forces above. Admiral, a panicked voice crackled over comms. This is flagship Asterisk Ascension, massive slipspace rupture in Sector 4. It's not Syndicate technology. The energy signature is, the voice cut to static. The dust storms of Haven 9 parted briefly. Something tore into reality above, not gliding out of slipspace like the elegant Syndicate vessels, but ripping through with the brutal force of a sledgehammer. A floating continent of dark gray armor plating, exposed conduits, and glowing yellow exhaust ports. 40 miles long, blocky, utilitarian, terrifying in its sheer functionality. Across its broadside, in harsh neon orange lettering, HFY Custodial Dreadnought Event Horizon. Beside it, the ancient hexagonal Westinghouse logo. By the stars, Caldwell breathed, falling to his knees. Flagship Ascension report, Bainbridge screamed into his comms. Admiral, it's emitting a localized gravity well. Shielding is useless. It's locking onto our weapon systems. The proud Syndicate armada was dragged toward the human dreadnought like iron filings to a magnet. Giant mechanical arms, each the size of a skyscraper, unfolded from the Event Horizon S belly. They didn't fire. They simply reached out, grabbed the Syndicate cruisers and clamped them into holding brackets. It's towing us, the fleet captain yelled. It's registered our fleet as unlicensed scrap. A resonant tone broadcast through every piece of Syndicate technology at once, overriding it instantly. The voice was deep, synthesized, unmistakably human, carrying an accent unheard on Earth for 50 millennia. Alert, WIPP Outpost A9 containment breach detected. Unauthorized alien biologicals detected in restricted zone. Commencing automated sterilization protocol. Red emergency lights flooded the deck. Outside, colossal weapon batteries lowered, not energy weapons, but rail guns the size of small cities, loading kinetic slugs that could crack a planet in half. Bainbridge stood frozen. His doctrine had no countermeasure for a garbage truck that could conquer a solar system. Granger, Reed said levelly, despite the impending apocalypse, do something. Granger sighed, picked up his hard hat, and walked to the primary comm console. He shoved the Syndicate officer aside, flipped the physical override switch, and tapped the microphone. WHI Dreadnought, this is Eric Granger, Sol Alliance, Bechtel Lockheed Contractor, ID 84729. Cancel sterilization protocol. I repeat, cancel sterilization. We have the leak contained. The red light stopped flashing. Silence returned. 10 agonizing seconds passed. Processing. Genetic signature detected. Homo sapiens. Employee ID accepted. Welcome back, maintenance personnel Granger. It has been 52,143 standard years since your last clock-in. You are severely late for your shift. Granger chuckled. Traffic was murder. Understood. The unlicensed scrap in orbit has been impounded. Do you wish for the fleet to be recycled for raw materials? Admiral Bainbridge, the proud, unyielding commander of the Syndicate's Fourth Fleet, let out a pathetic, high-pitched whimper. He looked at Granger, eyes begging. All the arrogance of the elder races dissolved in the face of humanity's forgotten industrial might. Granger let him sweat a moment, savoring the shift in the room. Negative, Event Horizon, release the scrap. They're with me, just some local subcontractors. Acknowledged, releasing scrap. Awaiting further instructions, Supervisor Granger. The automated fleet of the Terran Sphere is online and ready to resume operations. Granger took his finger off the microphone and looked around the room. Caldwell was weeping. Bennett was furiously downloading the Dreadnought's blueprints like a kid in a candy store. Reed grinned ear to ear. Bainbridge stared at the floor, a broken man. Well, Admiral, Granger said, picking up his toolbox, the metal clanking loudly in the quiet room. I think the Syndicate and the Sol Alliance are going to need to sit down and renegotiate our trade agreements, because it looks like you folks have been squatting on Earth property for a few thousand years. Bainbridge couldn't speak. He offered only a weak, trembling nod. Good. Granger pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and a grease pencil, walked over to Caldwell and slapped it down on the table. Now, Art, I'm clocking out. Sign my time sheet. And like I said, I'm charging triple overtime for the apocalypse. Caldwell, hands shaking, signed the paper. Eric Granger smiled, tipped his hard hat, and walked out of the command center. Humanity hadn't just discovered the gods. They were the gods, and the gods were heavily unionized.